First of all, I would like to thank Brenda Dunn for inviting me to present this work done in Romania. In the same time, I had the privilege to work with some young scientists in Romania, which are Irene, Octavia, and Angela, three young scientists known as the witches of the seismological department in Romania. They are working on earthquake prediction. As you know, earthquake prediction today is not accepted, not because might be not possible in the future, but because, as we all know, that doesn't work. Nobody predicted the biggest destructive earthquakes that happened in the last few years. As you see, I'm going to speak about the earthquake activity in Vrancea, Romania, which is a very peculiar area. To understand Vrancea, you have to understand a little bit about the subduction, how oceanic plates subduct under the continents. Like the Caucasus oceanic plate is subducting right now under the continent of North America. But in the past, it was the Farallon plate subducting under the continent where is now California. But this subduction finished tens and hundreds of million years ago, and now the Farallon plate might be in the mantle somewhere in the middle of North America. What is in Vrancea now is just the moment when the continent-continent collision finished, and now the oceanic plate is breaking from the continent. So, as you can see, here is a simplified tectonic map of the Alps and the Carpathians, and the Vrancea region is situated here. So, what is interesting that the earthquake activity in Vrancea region is destructive only in this area, and it happens at the depths between 70 kilometers and 150 kilometers. While these points that mark the normal quakes in the crust in between 0 and 60 kilometer depths, they have never been destructive in the historic time. The cycle of the large and destructive earthquakes is 1 in 50, 80 years. So I was experienced the last one in 1940, the 7.4 magnitude and destructive earthquake, when the highest building in Bucharest, Carlton Hotel, collapsed. And in 1977, when 50 high-rise building collapsed in Bucharest, and 1,500 people died, 10,000 people injured. So, sure, people are very afraid of these large earthquakes. Why? Because there are a lot of high-rise buildings in poor condition that might be destroyed in the next earthquake, and the next destructive earthquake is expected soon. That means in a few years, because the cycle is almost finished, but nobody knows when. And the goal of the presentation is to develop a method of biolocation methodology able to map crustal faults in and around the Vrancea region, to monitor the earthquake activity along these crustal faults, and finally to correlate intermediate depth earthquake in Vrancea to biolocation data obtained daily on two perpendicular faults. Well, this biolocation phenomenon is not what you know about dowsing, because it is something else. If dowsing is related, according to the Randi definition, as a claimed ability to find water, minerals, lost people, well, this is not what we are doing. What we're doing is to use the human body, to use a sense, because if you think that the sixth sense might be the ESP sense, which you all agree after all, well, I'm speaking about the seventh sense, might be an eighth sense. And this is a book I highly recommend about the more senses. This is a book written by anthropologists, because in different cultures, they discuss about the different senses. So what is the sense I'm talking about? Is a sense that is coming from our animal ancestors. That means in order to be able to develop this sense, we have to quiet our mind and to give the mind something to do, like concentrated about walking, about relaxing your body. And let's say the right hand that is keeping the biolocation rod, that is able to show you a contraction or a relaxation of the muscle, you have to think at this hand that doesn't belong to you. This is something that your mind cannot influence. So this is the way of training in the method we use. And it's very easy to understand this type of phenomenon if you read the book written by Professor Sweet, a professor of geology, The History of Geophysical Prospecting. In the history of geophysical prospecting, Sweet is talking about a boy of 11 years old age from Texas, from a quite rich family at the beginning of the 20th century, so in 1901. And this kid was disturbed, has contraction in these muscles whenever he was crossing a certain area on the farm. So he told his father, and the father dug and found water. It was moving water on the ground. Well, a brother of this little kid was a well-known lawyer, and he advised the kid to put these things in practice. So the kid was able to discover oil, not because he was thinking of oil or water, as you think in dowsing, but because he was disturbed by something in the earth, some kind of geophysical anomaly. Later on, the boy went to school and was not interested. Also, Sweet is speaking later about the use of intuition in oil prospecting, which was, he says, catastrophical at the beginning of the century. That's why the United States Geological Survey forbidden any research and any use of dowsing. So after this introduction, we can go further. So I was able to find a boy of 11 years old in this region of Vrancea, and I was trained him to do the same I explained you that I'm doing in order to look for the reproducibility of data. And we've been able to map, by this method, a series of faults, of fractures. These faults in red. And after we made this map, we tried to prove that these faults are real, which was not easy because this fault didn't show on the geological maps, existing geological maps. But this fault here, we've been lucky it was an earthquake magnitude 4, and the aftershocks magnitude 3, 4, 2 was aligned on this direction. So these are the aftershocks, and suggested this fault. Okay, then here you can see a biolocation reaction recorded at an arbitrary scale. So if you start your measurement far away, the zero of the instrument, which is your rod in your hand, will show that there is no reaction. Then the instrument is moving in one direction towards a maxima at the arbitrary scale, which represent a contraction of the muscle. This is a relaxation, another contraction, and the finishing of the signal. And if the fault is inclined in the eastern direction, the distance EC is larger than AC. Okay, so then in order to prove that these faults are real, I went at the Institute of Geology and Geophysics, where I worked 30 years ago, and I was able to convince the director to declassify a geologic map which was put on a military map and was classified under the communists and still remained classified. So I was able to buy this geologic map, and the fault I discovered was shown on this geologic map, is this fault. And this is the fault in the cross-section, So I was lucky that we've been able to prove that the fault was real. What was the most interesting thing? That these areas, there are 3 huge landslides. And the GPS station, one of the main GPS stations put by them was put just on the landslide, so they have to avoid these landslides. So an interesting question would be, why these landslides they've been created? They've been created like a normal landslide by rain, or they've been created by the earthquakes. So this is a study of paleoseismology that by searching the landslide, you can find out about earthquakes in the past, like 1,000 or 10,000 years before, which are not known. And no work was done in Romania about these things, so I was able to involve a geology professor from Menzies who is asking for a grant at present to start next year to do paleoseismological work with this landslide and with sun blows, because there are a lot of sun blows that happens during the earthquakes. And what you see here in this area was an area where the water was flowing before the year 1801. In 1801 was the largest known historical earthquake in Romania, magnitude 7.7, which created a terrible destruction, known in Romania like the greatest earthquakes. But what we don't know, if such earthquakes bigger than this one, they've been happening in the past, and the paleoseismology is able to find this. So what I want to show you now is our main work. What is shown here on the horizontal axis is time in days. And on the vertical axis, the distance between the beginning of the biolocation signal and the axle of the fault. So if the fault strike is the same, the beginning of the signal varies, can be larger and larger, as you see here. Then there's a sharp increase and a decrease, and is following by the earthquakes. And this type of measurements was done on 2 perpendicular faults, and some of the quakes, you see, like this one, they've been able to be indicated, not predicted, because we cannot predict the time, the place, and the magnitude of the quake, but just to indicate that the quake is coming, and these quakes, they've been larger than magnitude 4. The final remarks. The biolocation data variation obtained across crustal faults correlate to intermediate depth earthquakes larger than magnitude 3. A stress transfer is suggested from a depth of 7 to 150 kilometer depths to the crust, where these faults, which I showed you, they've been measured by biolocation. But sure, statistical analysis is necessary for a longer period of time to support the correlation. And finally, we are now in a pre-seismic period, which is about 1 or 2 years, because the interseismic period in Vrancea, which is now like 30, 50 years, is almost finished. So an earthquake is expected soon there, a destructive one. So in Vrancea, earthquakes are destructive only when larger than magnitude 7.2. What I would like to tell is that for the first time, the Seismological Society of America accepted this type of presentations. So we've been able to present this data in Memphis last year at the meeting in April of the Seismological Society of America. And I have further work, which was presented this year at the April meeting in San Diego, which I'm not able to show you at present, but I have a poster with me, so anyone interested, I can show the poster. So these things, they've been considered anomalies because, anyway, this phenomenon was not accepted. But little by little, by facts, we can prove that it's a real phenomenon, that it's worth to be studied in the future.
Thank you. There's time for questions.
My name is Bob Patterson. What's this device you're using? You talk about muscle strength. Are you measuring EMGs, or what are you actually measuring with this device?
Well, we are not use any physical device. We're doing exactly as Agricola is describing this phenomenon in the 16th century. Like in his De Re Metallica. So we didn't use any physical instrument, just an L rod or a Y rod or any type of dowsing rod, if you like, because it's the same dowsing rod, but our methodology is different than the dowsing as described by Randy.
Yes, my name is Rich. and I've used dowsing many times to obtain water. On one slide, you had the ethnoid bone is where the magnetic crystals are found. What is the sphenoid bone noted for? I didn't get it wrote down in time. You have a slide where you had the ethmoid bone has magnetic crystals.
Well, I didn't have any slide with the ethnoid bone.
Yeah, you did.
Which slide?
And you also had the sphenoid bone on the same slide.
Which slide you
Now
talking
keep going
about?
back.
Which slide you talking about?
Okay,
This one?
thank you.
That's all the slides I have.
That one.
This way?
No. There, that one.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Well, this is how this biolocation might be explained. So different possible explanation. In my opinion, the biolocation can be explained by an anomaly in the electromagnetic field. What kind of anomaly? Is an anomaly of resistivity. Well, definitely we need some further research for the explanation of the phenomenon, but the phenomenon doesn't appear in all situations, geological situations, only in faults, water moving above the water table, moving around springs, caves in limestone, and salt domes. So what is in common between all these situations is the anomaly in the stress. Certainly the stress cannot be measured at the Earth's surface, only the strain can be measured. So what the stress is creating is a disturbance in the magnetotelluric field. So this disturbance of magnetotelluric field is detected probably. So the phenomenon is basically an electromagnetic field. It's an electromagnetic disturbance in the magnetotelluric field based on the anisotropy which is changed by the stress. So not the stress is detected by an electromagnetic phenomenon generated by the change in stress.
So that might go part way to explaining the sort of biolocation that you use on site. But if somebody does dowsing using a map, that would be something very different. Right?
Well, in our approach, we don't use map dowsing because map dowsing is a phenomenon related with our mind. We want to depress our mind and to go lower, to change you in a dog or in an animal, to get rid of the. So in this phenomenon in biolocation, our mind is a disturbance. So we don't use our mind, but our body.
Thank you. That's our time is up now.